All right, it's the end of the week here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. You know that. It's the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. The most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, recruiting, you know that. All, and of course, we try to dally in the other sports as well, give you as much Pitt sports coverage as we can. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, and of course right here on YouTube at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel so you never miss any of our Pitt video content, whether it's these daily morning Pitt videos Monday through Friday, our live Panther-Lair show on Wednesday nights at 8:30 p.m. every Wednesday right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, or any of the other Pitt content we post. You can see it up at the top of the page there. We just put up a video yesterday of the new Victory Heights project. Got a chance to talk with Heather Like, Pitt's director of athletics, yesterday about the Victory Heights project. They are digging it up. There's lots of heavy machinery and heavy equipment. Seems like a very dangerous place to be in between the Peterson Event Center and whatever that dorm is that they built next to it, Panther Hall or Pennsylvania Hall, or I don't even know what it is. It's hard to keep track of all the new buildings on Pitt's campus these days. But anyway, it's a major construction area, and they had some new renderings to show and new videos to show, and so they showed it to us yesterday at the Peterson Event Center. It looks very cool, the Victory Heights project. Unfortunately, it's not, I've been told, because I inquired, it's not, internally they are not referring to it by the shorthand of the Heights. I was hoping that was the case, that instead of just walking around saying Victory Heights all the time, they'd be like, hey, let's have a meeting about the Heights, you know, and maybe they play that song, How Do You Talk to an Angel? But unfortunately, none of that is happening. So, like I say, we're a comprehensive news source, news outlet here. Everything you need to know about Pitt sports, like those big questions like that. So it's the Friday edition of the Morning Pitt. We do these every Friday. We've been doing it basically since spring camp ended, and actually maybe the last week, I forget exactly. Do these mailbag editions of the Morning Pitt. Take questions on the Between Fifth and Forbes message board on Panther-Lair.com and answer as many of them as we can, or as many as we want to, right here on the Friday edition of the Morning Pitt. It's fun to do. I enjoy this. I mean, I like planning out and talking about whatever I want to talk about, but I like taking questions and kind of having these conversations and discussions. I do enjoy it. I think it's a lot of fun, and I appreciate everyone who submits questions. And we actually didn't get all the questions done last week. There were some questions that were posted after we recorded the Morning Pitt last week, so I want to wrap up those questions first before we jump into the questions this week. Let me see. I believe this is this week's list of questions. Chet the Jet started it off, or this was where I kind of left off last week. Chet the Jet said, Pitt's spring game was better than many that I viewed this weekend, or last weekend. He's suggesting a scrimmage versus another team like Ohio State, home and home, can replace this practice game with much more interest and real opposition that would give the staff a better view of who really is in the mix. Can you get that ball rolling? Well, no, Chet the Jet, I can't get that ball rolling, but I can say a few things about what you suggested. Number one, and I'll start with the last part where you say it would give the staff a better view of who is really in the mix. And I see what you're getting at there. I smell what you're cooking. But the reality is, for the coaches, that's practice number 15 out of spring camp. And if you were going to rank the practices 1 through 15 of which ones have the most impact on their views of the players, most impact on their evaluations, and which ones have the least, with 1 being the most and 15 being the least, I don't know how 1 through 14 would get lined up, but number 15 would absolutely be the spring game. And that's true for every coach at every program across the country. The spring game is very low on the list when it comes to evaluations and how they see the players. They're going to go off what they see in the first 14 practices, even the ones without pads, far more than they're going to go off of the spring game. They're going to go off of their, film sessions and meetings and all those things far more than they're going to go on the spring game. So even if you played it against a team like Ohio State, per your suggestion, it's not going to give the coaches anything extra to consider. They're not going to really look at it any differently, I don't think. And there's a few reasons for that. One is, no matter how they set it up, if they played Ohio State every year, home and home, or whoever, they're still going to go with a vanilla offense, vanilla defense. They're going to do very little in the way of game planning. They're not going to show anything that they didn't do the year before. And so I think the coaches are going to take those 14 practices where they're actually working on their real offense and their real defense, and they're going to base their evaluations on those. I don't think, even if somehow it comes to pass that you can scrimmage another team in the spring, I don't think it's going to be, it wouldn't be a Pitt versus Ohio State type of thing. It would be Pitt versus Duquesne. It would be Ohio State versus Youngstown State or something like that. I think you're going to have FBS versus FCS, Power 5 versus FCS, or even Division 2, something like that. First of all, it's somebody you can bring into your stadium. You know what I mean? Pitt can bring Duquesne to Acrisure. Ohio State can bring Youngstown State, to the Horseshoe. You're not going to give up the potential for revenue that you get out of that, and agree to a home and home with another FBS team. You're going to bring in an FCS team or something like that, somebody you can play with a limited offense and limited defense and still have a pretty good chance of just beating them just based on talent alone. And I guess it would provide something more of an interesting product. I guess. I think they did a little bit better this year with the change in spring game format. Than they had, I think the product was a little bit better than it was in previous years, although they still didn't score all that much. I just, the spring games are what they are. And we all made fun of Paul Christ for canceling it because he said, I've never walked out of a spring game and didn't feel like we just wasted that time. I understand that. I get it. I think it's a good event for fans. Personally, I think, I don't see a big move among coaches to cancel their spring games like Paul Christ did. Every now and then it happens. I was going to say, give the coaches 15 practices and then let them hold number 16 as a public event. I just think it's something nice to do for fans, to let the fans see the team the one time they're going to see it between the bowl game and the start of the regular season. Like, give the fans something to look for. Every now and then you can do things that are just nice for the fans. Like, they don't all have to be rooted in that unending desire to win and make money. You can just do something nice for fans. It can be a nice event. And so in that respect, a Pitt Ohio State home and home annual spring game scrimmage would be a blast. That's not going to happen. Pitt Duquesne, you might get that. If the NCAA ever changes the rules, or if and when we come to that point where the NCAA ceases to matter or be relevant or exist, and the Power 5 conferences, or whatever's left of them, the Big Ten and the SEC, decide that they're going to allow these FCS scrimmages in the spring. But just give fans something to enjoy. I think it's one of the few things that you can say is pretty much done exclusively for the enjoyment of the fans. Coaches don't get much out of it. Players don't get much out of it. The fans are really the ones who benefit from having a spring game. And I think it's okay to do it for that reason. Jam05 Pitt says, is Rodney Hammond really going to return kicks? I know Izzy Abanikanda took one or two to the house. The Virginia game in 2021 was huge, but I still don't like it. Not worth the risk reward, in my opinion. Also, I'm sure I missed it during one of the spring write-ups, but who is in line to return punts? Look, I don't get it with using the running backs to return kicks. That's just not. I don't understand it. I didn't get it when they used Izzy Abanikanda. And when he got hurt or had to miss time, I didn't get it why they used Rodney Hammond. Or I guess when he didn't play in the Sun Bowl, I didn't get it why they used Rodney Hammond. I've said this a million times. I think with a kick returner, number one, you want a guy who's going to catch the ball, and that's even more important on the punt returns than the kick returns. But you just want your fastest guy. Your job as special teams coordinator is to set up a good blocking scheme on kick returns so that if you execute it, you can get a big return out of it. The blocking is far more important than the ability to make a guy miss or something like that out of your kick returner. I want the fastest guy possible so that if I execute a well-designed blocking scheme, that guy can take it to the house. He's fast enough to get through there and outrun everybody and get into the end zone. Ultimately, like 75% of the kicks, maybe more, going to the end zone anyway, and then they're touchbacks. So it's becoming less and less relevant. But yeah, I don't understand why there's this desire or this need to use running backs on kick returns, particularly your starting running back. And yeah, we've seen Rodney Hammond return some kicks during spring camp, but I think they've moved some different guys in and out of there. I mean, other running backs like Sebo Flemister and TJ Harvison, but also, we've seen a few receivers back there catching kickoffs. And the same thing with the punt return. I mean, I think MJ Devonshire is probably the lead guy there, but Kanate Mumpfield has gotten some work. Some of the younger receivers, I think Che Wabuko has caught a little bit in practice that we've seen. Punt return to me is the one where the number one thing you have to be able to do is catch the ball. Number one thing you have to do is be reliable catching the punt, because you cannot afford a fumble on the punt return. I mean, that is, you just won. You won when you force them to punt. You can't give the ball right back. That's a game-changing play. And so I don't care if a guy averages 0.0 on punt return yardage. I need him to catch the ball. Even if all he does is call for a fair catch every time and just secure the catch. That's all that matters to me. Then I know they got a punt return touchdown out of MJ Devonshire last year against Rhode Island or whoever it was. So I guess they'll probably keep him in that role. I don't hate it, but you are putting a starting defensive player at risk for more hits than he probably needs to take. So I don't have a good answer on those. I don't know. I don't know why they want to put running backs back there. Devonshire will probably continue to be the punt returner, I would think. Let's scroll down here. NC Panther says, I'd like to see Che Wabuko return punts and kickoffs to save Rodney Hammond and MJ Devonshire. Any thoughts on that? Yeah, I mean, there we go with the speed thing, right? Give me that fastest guy. If he can line up under the kickoff, read it, understand when to let the ball go into the end zone, when to let it go for a touchback, and when to try to return it. If he can understand all those things, you can trust him to do all those things, then all right, put him back there, because he is probably your fastest guy. Get him out there and let him run. We'll see if the coaches decide to do that. He was redshirting last year, but now you might as well give him a chance. That's where I would give him a chance. People often say Che Wabuko, man, just put him out there. Just see what he can do with all that speed. Well, I understand not wanting to just see what he can do on offense, but on kick return, I'll give him a shot there. Let's see. Pitt 97 says, he has 3 questions here. Says, since you were ringing the bell for Izzy Abanikanda last offseason, where would you like to see him land in the NFL, and what round would you take him? Yeah, I'm not great at this kind of stuff. I mean, we'll see him obviously get drafted. Running backs, being deprioritized doesn't help a guy like him. A guy who I think is really talented, a guy who obviously had a really productive year last year, led the entire country in rushing touchdowns, set a Pitt record for rushing yards in a single game, and then he tested off the charts. I still don't know where you end up drafting a running back. I mean, I feel like I read a lot of things about how not just running backs, but the running game is less and less important anymore, particularly in the NFL, but probably in college. And investing money in a running back, even guys who are pass catching running backs, it just doesn't. It makes more sense to go on the cheap. It seems like that's the growing consensus, and so it's tough for me to project what makes the most sense. I mean, if you're Izzy Abanikanda or Bijan Robinson, even or any of these guys, you want to go to a team that's going to run the ball. You want to go to a team that's going to put some emphasis on it, but. I guess there are different systems like the Niners. Wow, that's a great one for running backs, and there's probably a few out there in the NFL, but it's hard to say that this would be a great landing spot. I think if you're Izzy Abanikanda, you want to go somewhere that doesn't have that big time back, that clear number one, so you maybe have the best opportunity to get on the field and play. But I don't know. It's such a weird point right now for running backs in the NFL. That I think it's tough to really kind of project. It'll be interesting to see where he gets drafted. I would have to think he gets picked by the 4th round, no later than the 4th round. So that would mean that I would expect to see him go, if not tonight, then early tomorrow. I hope, because I think they do 2nd and 3rd tonight, right? I always figured I'd have second and third. I think it's second and third tonight, and then 4, 5, 6, 7 tomorrow. I would hope he goes in the top 3 rounds. It'd be great if he was a 3rd round pick. I just don't know if it's going to happen. And I'll be interested to see how all these running backs go, because there are talented guys. Bijan Robinson's really good. Jahmyr Gibbs is really good. The kid from UCLA is really good. But I think Abanikanda compares favorably with a lot of them. A lot of the guys that we consistently see as the top 5, top 7 running backs in this draft class, I think he compares favorably and even superior in some cases. Just don't know how it's going to shake out. Pitt 97's second question: will we see Che Wabuko get the ball this season? I have a hard time understanding why a guy who can run by everyone on the field doesn't get a few looks per game. You have to be able to trust him to run the offense. And I know, well, just simplify the offense then. Just get the ball in his hands. I just don't think coaches think like that. I know coaches don't think like that. You know, I mean, if you have a guy who only does one thing or can only do one thing, or you only have one way to get the ball in his hands and he only has one type of play that he runs, I think coaches feel like you're giving up a lot, because it becomes sort of obvious. Oh, if number 21 comes on the field, they're going to do this. Or there's only one thing we have to worry about number 21 doing, is this. If he can expand his game and be a complete receiver or a complete slot back or whatever his position ends up being, then yeah, he could play and he can put that speed to use. But we've seen plenty of guys with plus level speed or plus level athleticism, and they just can't cut it. You know, they just can't get the job done. And I'm not writing off Che Wabuko and saying that's the case with him, but it doesn't seem like he's all that high on the depth chart, which says to me that he's still trying to master those finer details of being a wide receiver, being someone who's versatile enough that he can challenge defenses. Because if you're versatile enough, if you have enough in your arsenal, the defenses have to respect you for more than one sort of, threat, then you're going to be far more likely to execute and succeed with that thing that you're good at. You know, if they say, well, you got to watch out because 21 can do this and do that and do this and do that, then you can really catch them and do the thing that you're best at and use that speed to your advantage. You've got to be able to show that you're a threat to do all of those things, though. And number 3, he asks, what is the running back pecking order at this point after the spring game in 2022? We all thought Daniel Carter would have a big role, then we barely saw him during the season, and it seems like he's behind the other 3 guys at this point. Well, I just don't know that Daniel Carter is on. I mean, he'll get snaps at tailback like he did in the spring game, but I mean, I think you have Rodney Hammond. I think you have Sebo Flemister. I think you have Derek Davis, and those are sort of your top tailbacks, your top running backs. And Daniel Carter's role is somewhere in between fullback, H-back, tailback. And in certain situations, he could line up as the tailback. He could line up as the running back in certain situations, but not, all situations. I think Rodney Hammond is a guy they will go to regardless of down and distance. Assuming they can trust him in the pass protection. I think Sebo Flemister is a guy they can go to and will go to regardless of down and distance. Derek Davis, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what level he worked up to during spring camp. Daniel Carter, I think, in terms of lining up as a running back, I don't think he's sort of, down and distance proof. I think he's down and distance dependent. And I'm not sure he's going to really shake that reputation of being a short yardage back. Now, I could be completely wrong, and he's completely changed his game, and they've completely changed the way they see him, and he could be a 3-down back and play in every situation and be the number 1 back. I don't know. I just think the way it looks now, and from everything I've gathered, it's, he's probably in that short yardage / fullback role again, and probably should do well at it. If you use that role right, you can get George Aston scored 10 touchdowns, right? Daniel Carter is not George Aston, and Frank Signetti's offense is not Matt Canada's offense. But you can use guys like that and get a lot of scores on quick hitting things, quick handoffs, quick shovel passes, things like that. You just got to use him. But I don't see him being in that tailback rotation, not on an every down or down and distance independent basis. See here. Cover 2 Panther says, I see Nakai Johnson making an impact on the defensive line if he stays healthy next year. How about Elliott Donald? Will he be in the mix? I really like Isaiah Neal. Think he's going to be our next great one at nose tackle from what I saw in the spring game. Does Ryan Baer start this year? I think he is that good. Lots of questions in there. Cover 2 Panther. Elliott Donald, I don't know. I don't know what to expect from him. I hear good things about him, and then I hear that they're working him at both defensive end and defensive tackle. And yeah, that can speak to his versatility. Yeah, they're trying to find ways to get him on the field, but I don't know. To me, it sort of feels like a guy who needs to find a home, and it's got to be at one of those positions, and maybe he's not really excelling at either one. I mean, they're cross-training him there. They cross-trained Bam Brima there, too, at both spots, and he didn't really play a whole lot. Deslin Alexandra moved to defensive tackle because it was a need and moved back to defensive end because it was a need. But this doesn't feel like that. This seems like it's more a matter of, let's see what we can figure out that actually works for Elliot Donald that gets him on the field. I mean, I think he's behind the 3 sixth-year senior defensive tackles, David Green and Devin Danielson and Tyler Bentley. I think he might be behind Sean Fitzsimmons, too. And that's just a tackle. If you're talking about defensive end, he's behind Deion Hayes. He's behind Nakai Johnson. He might be behind, he's probably behind Bam Brima. And he might even be behind Sam Okunlola. Oh, he's probably behind DeAndre Jules at tackle, too. So, I'm not sure how he's going to fit in. I think he's a talented player. I think he's got a lot of potential. I just don't know how he's going to fit in this year. Isaiah Neal, I think is going to be really good. I agree with you about him. I think he's a really talented player, and he's going to be really good. I don't know if he's going to be really good this year. I don't know if he's going to make a huge impact this year, but I think his future looks really bright. And does Ryan Baer start this year? This is going to be one of the interesting things to watch throughout spring camp and heading into the season. I don't know. I don't know if Ryan Baer is going to start this year. I think he's going to play this year. I think there might be some rotation on the offensive line with Baer either going in at left tackle or left guard. I said at the end of spring camp, I think it's a 3-man battle for the 2 spots on the left side of the line with Branson Taylor, Ryan Jacoby, and Ryan Baer. And whichever 2 are the best, those are the 2 that are going to play. And because Baer has kind of learned tackle and guard, you have that. Dave Borbely has that flexibility. Oh, if the 2 best players are Taylor and Baer, then Taylor can play left tackle and Baer can play left guard. If the 2 best players are Taylor and Jacoby, then Taylor can play Taylor can play tackle and Jacoby can play guard. If the 2 best players are Baer and Jacoby, then Baer can play tackle and Jacoby can play guard. Taylor's a tackle, Jacoby's a guard, and Baer is the wild card who can play either spot, and that allows them the flexibility to find the best 2 out of that group. I think Jake Cradle's locked in at center. I think Blake Sabovic's locked in at right guard. I think Matt Gonsalves is locked in at right tackle. Figuring out that left side is what's still up in the air, and I don't think that's a bad thing because I think you have 3 pretty good players there, and you'll get the 2 best out of those 3, which should give you the best offensive line. Now, I think the first question this week actually was something along those lines. I don't know if it was the first question this week, but let me see. Wait, there was somebody who asked about the offensive line. Here it is. Smenges said, if healthy, could this be Pitt's best O-line of the Narduzzi era? Will it be top 3 in the ACC? And then PGH Sunj1325 responded and said, I'm not Chris, but here's my input. The 2016 offensive line is unmatched with Adam Bisnovati, Dorian Johnson, Alex Officer, Alex Bookser, and Brian O'Neill. It also says 2021 and 2022 were pretty good, and this one will probably be in line with those. So that's what I would agree about that. I think the 2016 offensive line was great. It was a big reason why that offense worked so well. I've often said this. Matt Canada, yeah, he's a genius and all this stuff. He had great play calling instincts, really good with play design. But he also had that offensive line that I just listed, plus James Conner, Scott Orndorff, George Aston, and Nate Peterman to execute it. And those guys executed it. They were super sharp. And the reason that offense worked so well is because they were so sharp in how they executed it. So many of those things had to hit, boom. When you watch like the shovel passes, they're working against Clemson, this big, fast SEC level defense, and they're hitting shovel passes to Scott Orndorff and George Aston because it moves so quick. And it strikes so quickly. It's not slow. There's no hesitation. Those guys were sharp. And that's why that offense worked. And a big part of it was the offensive line. So I got to give the nod to 2016. But this group should be like that reply was. I think in line with the last couple of years, which have been pretty good. Pitt Chag says, do you see Pitt circling back on Tyler Johnson? So Tyler Johnson, 4-star guard from the Bronx, or goes to school in the Bronx. He was committed to Memphis, and he decommitted to Memphis. He committed there in November. Decommitted earlier this week, back on the market. A class of 2023 prospect, going to be a freshman in the fall. Pitt was involved with him. They I don't know if they were one of the finalists, but they got pretty far down the line with him. I don't see Pitt really having much of a chance there. I just don't see them being able to land another point guard. I think with Dior Johnson, Jalen Lowe, they're fairly set at point guard. And even if it's, even if the coaches say, well, we could use another one, I'm not sure they're really going to be able to get another one. I just don't think they're going to have much success with a point guard. So I don't see that happening. There was another question I really wanted to get to that I liked. DUQ Dave says, going back 10 years, who were some guys who visited Pitt but went to school elsewhere and turned into star NFL players, if any? There were a number of them. Pitt has hosted and recruited guys who ended up being really good. But I'll tell you one guy who kind of gets forgotten as a Pitt target, and they ended up missing out on him. He was from Coatesville. He was in the recruiting class of 2007, I think it was. Yep, 2007. He visited. Good God! I just was looking up an article that I wrote about this guy, and I wrote this article in 2006. So this is 17 years ago, and I'd like to think that my writing has gotten better than this. It says, for this player, the recruiting process has been like a classic punk rock song, short and explosive. I could still go into the admin and edit these articles. I might have to just go delete that track. I mean, really? Anyway, the player was Derek Morgan, a defensive end from Coatesville. He went to Georgia, ended up being a first-round draft pick, ACC or AFC Defensive Player of the Year, I think. Right? Is that what he was? ACC Defensive Player of the Year, first-round draft pick. Ended up being 44.5 sacks over the course of 9 seasons in the NFL, playing for the Tennessee Titans. Had a really good career, was a really successful player. And Pitt had him on campus in June of 2006. Dave Wanstead was trying to recruit him. So that's one guy who, that was a long time ago, ended up going to Georgia Tech, having a really great career at Georgia Tech, and then pretty good career in the NFL as well. But you can look around, and there will always be guys that pop up and you're like, oh, that guy. Corey Clement. He's not a star in the NFL, but he was committed to Pitt for a while. I always say, and we'll leave it at this, Corey Clement was a running back in the class of 2013. Kid out of New Jersey. He was committed to Pitt, and it was all good, all well and good. And they get into the fall of his senior season, and he decides he's going to decommit and go to Wisconsin. Now, this is a relevant story, and this is something you can kind of hang over your Pitt fan friends' heads, okay? So this is the fall of 2012, because he's in the recruiting class of 2013. Corey Clement decommits, goes to Wisconsin. He ended up playing for the Eagles and I think a couple other teams. He's still in the league now, but he decommits and goes to Wisconsin. And as a result of that, Paul Christ and Joe Rudolph, the Pitt coaching staff at that time, fall of 2012, first year at Pitt, they go looking for another running back in the class of 2013. And they consider this guy and they consider that guy. I think Kareem Hunt was one of the targets that they were after. Actually, if you want to talk about NFL players who were, flirting with Pitt in the recruiting process, Kareem Hunt was one of them. And they're considering this guy and they're considering that guy. And ultimately they decide, they say, you know what? We don't really need another running back in this class. We have a running back in this class. It just so happens that we initially took him as a defensive end. But this kid from Erie, James Conner, we're watching him and he's a pretty good running back at his high school. We don't need to go get another running back recruit. This guy, he's not a defensive end anymore. He is our running back recruit in the class of 2013. I bring up that anecdote from time to time because people are under the impression that Pitt was going to take James Conner as a defensive end until Russell Shell left the team. But that's not how it happened. It's not. Russell Shell left the team in the spring of 2013, during spring camp 2013, which was after letter of intent day in February 2013. And when Pitt signed James Conner in February 2013, they signed him and introduced him as a running back recruit. Pitt was looking at James Conner as a running back. So people say that, oh, well, it was because Shell left. That's why Conner moved to offense. No, Pitt was looking at Conner as a running back when Shell was still on the team in the fall. In the fall of 2012 is when they made the decision to go after him as a running back, to consider him a running back recruit as opposed to he was already committed, but consider him a running back recruit. So it was about Corey Clement. Corey Clement is the answer to the trivia question, not Russell Shell. If you want to ask the question of who's, which players move precipitated James Conner going from offense or defense to offense, it's not Russell Shell. It's Corey Clement. So bring that up at parties. I mean, you will really impress people if you have that piece of minutia buried in your head from 11 years ago. And I am happy to bring that up every now and then just to make sure if we have new listeners or new viewers to make sure everyone knows the real story. Oh, man, I had some... what was that guy's name? Darn it. The guy on public radio said, and that's the rest of the story. Well, that is the rest of the story. And that's the rest of the Morning Pit here today on Friday. Thanks to everybody who submitted questions. It was a lot of fun. We didn't get to all of them. We'll try and get to more next week, but we'll get to as many as we can for these mailbag editions of the Morning Pit. I hope everyone enjoyed it. I know I have fun doing it. We ended up going pretty long today, but you have good questions. We have good topics to talk about. So appreciate everybody who tuned in. So thanks for watching all the Morning Pit videos this week. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's been a good week. Hope you had a good week. I hope you have a great weekend coming up. And we'll be back with you on Monday morning for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.